All right. So, as it generally goes, a lot of the good conversation starts before I hit record. and then,
Mhm.
and so I didn't want to lose all that. But Keith, thank you for being on the podcast. This has been something that we've been talking about for a very long time. And I just, I appreciate you and I appreciate your willingness to do this. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Couple of things that I want to talk about, and a lot of this is sparked kind of in our pre-conversation, is we don't really necessarily have an overall topic or theme for this conversation. And with since I've gotten to know you over the last, what is it, 2 years now?
Mhm.
When was I out there? Was it last winter or was it 2 winters ago?
It was last winter.
Because see, it feels like it's been 2 years for me. I don't know why that is, but even I was in Florida last week, and it feels like I've been back for 2 weeks, but for whatever reason, the time space continuum is shifting.
Yes,
um,
indeed.
but it I feel like that's appropriate for this though, because that's kind of how our conversations have always been. Like they evolve, they start somewhere and they end up somewhere else completely different, but it's all relevant to life. And you're somebody that's extremely gracious in sharing your knowledge with and wisdom and even just willingness to talk, with everybody around you. So thank you for that. um
Glad to do it.
Start off, you've got what's called the Get to Work devotional that you started a little. How long has that been going for? A year now too? Did that start this last year? It had to,
No, it started
because
started
it wasn't.
like the day before Memorial Day or something.
Yeah. So just this last year, because I remember you
Yep.
talking about, hey, I'm going to do something, and then all of a sudden it came out. So where did that? Where? Why? How did that start? Where did the drive come from?
I've been thinking about it for about a year and a half that I could do something. I watch others that are out there posting every day and or at least a couple times a week, and some of it meaningful and some of it not terribly meaningful.
Yeah.
And I thought, meaningful would be better.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a little bit of meaningful inside of me based on some activities that I've been doing literally for decades,
Yeah.
uh, that we can get more into at some point, or I might just go ahead and share at the end of this what I'm saying. So, Get to Work devotional came from me saying I've got this stuff boiling up in me, and I feel like I need to say something. I need to say these things, kind of almost to evacuate the overflow. So
Yeah.
you picture a glass, you're running water into it, and it's overflowing like crazy, right? So to evacuate the overflow to somewhere productive rather than down the drain, or to people that have heard it before or numb to my voice, then maybe I can reach out to those who are not already numb to my voice and 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 say some of the stuff that literally I've been saying in some cases for years. Uh, and what I mean by years is that when I was 28 years old, I made a commitment, and there's kind of a bit of a story that goes with it. I made a commitment to be in the Word every day of my life for the rest of my life. That was 31 years ago, 31 and a half years ago now, and it was a vow. It was out of in a moment of crisis where I absolutely had to have something more bigger than myself. I was at that point in my life, I was the father of 7 kids. Really, no reason to quit having kids. We were and being parents because my wife and I were good at it. We've always been very matriarchal and patriarchal in the way we do things. No reason to stop that, And we asked God, what's His opinion? No, we're having more than 4, let's say. We had 7.
Yeah.
Okay, so that was and then I had the business, and I had it for a number of years, and it was hard and confusing and never the same day to day, even though we did the same things every day
Yeah.
and a lot of decisions. And you understand what I'm saying about that. It's
Yes, I do.
There's a certain kind of crazy that comes with it, even though there's processes to what you do.
Yeah. So
And then ministry at church, and I realized at that point that I had to have something bigger than myself.
Yeah.
And that's where that commitment came out of, the desperation to say that I have to have something bigger, greater than me. 31 years ago, I started that. And this is kind of an outflow of that, where it's like, now I have so much. I don't get to talk. I don't get to preach. I don't teach at church. I teach some of my employees little snippets here and there, but I have to say something. I have to give the overflow to something rather than down a drain to something productive. So there you go.
I'm trying to figure out where I want to start, because you said a couple things that I almost wanted to stop you on, but I can't. But you're on a roll. You mentioned something about when you said that devour yourself, and obviously God's a part of that, to be in the Word every day of your life.
Yeah.
I got on this got in this conversation with somebody just the other day, is that it's interesting that you chose that, and the reason why I say is because oftentimes most people will commit to reading something or just investing in themselves every day, but there is a point, I feel like it's kind of watered down from the truth. You know what I mean? Because if you're following somebody else and you're following what they're saying, it's not that it's wrong. But the good thing about Christianity is you can always back everything up with the Bible and the Word of God. And so, you know, I feel like we're disillusioned to feel like, well, things are different now than they were back then. Not really. They're actually not any different at all. It's not any different now than it was back then, because what I'm getting to here is the relationship between John the Baptist and Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there was a lot of people that would follow John the Baptist and would mistake him for the quote unquote Messiah. And he says, no, like, I'm just repeating the things that I know to you. I'm not actually the guy. You
Yeah.
know, I'm not the dude. And we have that, we still deal with that same thing now, you know, and I have to watch this for myself, because I mean, how many people and platforms do you know that you can pay to be a part of? There's some sort of leader, there's some sort of group, and it's a giant, it's just kind of a giant thing that moves around in a group. But it's still, if it's true, that doesn't mean that what they're saying is wrong, but it's still secondary truth from the ultimate source, which is the Bible. Would you agree with that?
I would, with one more step, saying that
Okay.
the Bible is a dynamic book. It is alive, and it does, as the Bible says itself, it does cut. It does cut through the heart. It cuts through the bone and the marrow. Okay, it cuts to the deepest core.
Yeah.
But the author of the Bible is the issue.
Yes. Okay.
And not the people that wrote it, the ultimate author.
Yes. Yes.
He's the issue. He's the redemptive power. He's the one that gives salvation. He's the one that gives us victory over ourselves, over our sin, over the things we try to get from personal development, these other things, these disciplines.
Mm-hmm.
He's the one that gives us victory, actual victory over the things that are our lack of disciplines or our sins. Okay.
Yes. And so it's interesting that you said that, because you still involve yourself with retreats and seminars and all, and it's not like you're absent from that space either. But as far as what you chose and what you choose to invest into yourself as a non-negotiable daily thing is the ultimate source for where all of this comes from, all of this wisdom, you know, and it's, I hate to use the word because it's not in a negative way, but it's regurgitated. You know what I mean? It's repeated. And so that's something that stuck out to me, because I mean, I kind of struggle with that, is, you know, where is the balance? Where do the scales tip? Where do I go too far in one direction to where I'm more following a replica versus the actual thing? You know what I mean?
Yep. Yeah, let me give a quick example, not to take too much time, but
No, you're
I
fine.
heard recently in a sermon that, which I'd never heard, that, you know, we all know that cows have 5 stomachs, right?
Okay.
And they regurgitate their food, and they use that process to digest. Well,
Yeah.
apparently sheep have the same thing. I didn't know that. So so we are sheep. In the spiritual world, we're called sheep.
Yeah.
We're a little bit dumb sometimes. We go astray unless we have good direction. The shepherd in our life holding us within the pen and in a
Yeah.
safe place. We go to the unsafe places. And the guy in the sermon was talking about the fact that he was talking about spiritual meditation.
Mm-hmm.
And he was saying that a great example of that is when the sheep regurgitate their food, it's not fully digested until it moves a certain number of times. And he didn't give the number, but
Yeah.
the implication was 8 to 10 times it moves back and forth amongst these stomachs. It regurgitates back and forth.
Yeah.
It's a great example of what we need as spiritual disciples of Christ. We can fill our stomachs with a lot of people stuff,
Yeah.
and then of course another stomach will eat, you know, some of scripture and other these things. But ultimately, the way we come to what we're supposed to when it comes to wisdom and understanding, and the way we're supposed to live out those things, is by meditating it, regurgitating it back and forth, spending some time to actually chew on it,
Mm-hmm.
like literally, not just in our mouth, but in the case of that, the examples in the stomachs. Just, and
Yeah.
it does it kind of organically, kind of naturally.
Yeah.
Sometimes we want that immediate impact, and that's what we can get from personal development gurus. Like, and we can listen to Ed Milet and we get all amped up because he yells, you know.
Yeah.
We
And he's not
and you know what
necessarily
he's saying
wrong either.
wrong, but
Yeah.
it falls short about, okay, we can change the one behavior for now, but are we going to change it permanently? Well, we need to think about that for a while, because that's a big commitment. So meditation, kind of meditating, regurgitating, I
Yeah.
like that term. It's gross, but I like that term because it fits who we are and what we need to do on the inside.
Yeah. I I feel like the most realizations I've got is not when I was looking for the immediate answer, but after it, like you said, after it's regurgitated. Well, after you have let time pass.
Mm-hmm.
And in that time between, you know, the need and the solution for whatever it is you're going through, you know, because it it starts out, I'm searching for something, there's a need.
Yeah.
Okay, so then
Yeah.
you search it out, there's the action. By the time you actually get the solution, the timeline that you would like to have it is very short, but the timeline that you actually get it could be a lot longer than you were hoping for. So that space in between can bring a lot of different emotions, a lot. Anxiety, stress, depression, like maybe individually or maybe all at once, and they might come and go. And so, what do we do with that space in between so we don't lose ourselves in the process? And I have to, and this is a daily thing, remind myself who I am, what my faith is, and like, and more so, it boils down to the promises that are involved in that, you know, and the direction. Because if I'm trying to solve a problem that's bigger than me, then I need to listen to somebody who's bigger than me in order to actually get there. So if he says,
Yep.
be still, then I need to do just that. Be still. Be still and know that I'm God. You know, don't worry. This isn't like it will work out. And that time, that space in between, it's like, I think that's what will make or break a lot of people. You know, like what do you do with that? So I kind of got off on a rabbit trail there, but yeah, like I just it sinks in for me because it resonates a lot. You know, it's
Yeah.
something that I
Well,
deal with.
let me put a cap on the end of that
Please.
in regards to how God functions in regards to our timeline. So I came up with it. My dad has 100, what we call, his name is Earl. He has 100 Earlisms. We're always repeating him. He's been gone for decades. And
Mm-hmm.
I still say things he said at least once a day, twice a day. But one of my own is in regards to God, he is almost never early, but he is absolutely never late. So when he needs you to understand something, when he needs you, when you're supposed to understand it, we're the ones that are holding that back. He's not late.
Yeah.
Now, his timeline might be very different than ours in many areas of our life, and it often is, but he's never late. Now, he's rarely early because that he knows that being early wastes. It's like throwing pearls to swine. You don't throw jewelry in a pig pen. You don't do that. That's foolishness. He knows that we're foolish people and that we'll use it improperly. But if he gives it at the right time, in the right situation, then we learn the lesson, and then the kingdom, his work, then is produced through us because he gave it to us at the right time.
Right. Anything before that, we're not ready for it. It's
That's right.
kind of like giving a child a gun. Like, you don't know how to handle what I just gave you or what I have for you.
No, and the same applies to him revealing our shortcomings, the sin in our lives.
Yeah.
He will not, absolutely will not reveal more than we can handle. Now, if he showed me how filthy I really am when it comes to how my mind, I know a lot of it. I know some of it and a lot of it about myself. But if he revealed everything that's there, I literally would be crushed by that. So he doesn't do it.
So you're kind of, I mean, you're a very mild-mannered person, but it's not like you're not ambitious. Like, you've done a lot in your life. Have you found, in the waiting, we'll say, like, you just plain want to do more? And I ask that because I'm very much like that. It's like, I want to do way more than I'm doing right now, but I have to remind myself that, I'm not ready for that. Like, as
Yeah.
much as I don't want to admit that to myself, like, what I'm ready and capable for is where I'm at right now. And I already know where I could make better improvements from where I'm at right now. So really, the much more that I want, I don't like that's, I don't have the capability to take that on yet. That's just not a part of who I am yet.
Or the maturity. He's being gracious by kind of holding the reins a little bit back and saying, no, maybe next year or the year after, we'll let you. And he's not worried about the years. He's not in a hurry.
Yeah. Is that something that you've experienced too?
Oh yeah. In the last couple of years in my role at K&L has transitioned to me being more of what we here call the visionary.
Yeah.
I have 10 ideas a week. 9 of them are terrible. you know, and I shouldn't share them with anybody, but I do have some that are worth talking about,
Yeah.
and I bring those to the management team, who is my son and my wife. Not always. I usually wait and ruminate on it a while. I regurgitate it and I figure it out. Is it going to work? Because I know the questions are going to come.
Yeah.
So is there justification behind it and all these other things? But I look out in my future, and I won't get into all the things that I someday want to have as on my bucket list, and literally things that I think God's called me to before I die.
Yeah.
And some of it has to do with things that other people listening to this podcast like look at me, a fairly spiritual guy. Like, if I've been in the Word 31 years straight, then that means that spiritual is a big part of my life. And yet I have some financial goals that same person might look at me and say, no, those don't fit in the same person. They don't fit in the same world. And yet I think that's part of me growing, is I have this goal. Now, whether or not he gives me that goal just like I dream it, completely up to him. I hold loosely. I hold with open hands. They're not clenched on the vision, the goal that I think is, but they're open and they're loose so that he can make it what he wants. Because ultimately what I really want is I want to help people, and I want the kingdom of God. I want his kingdom to move forward. And I don't want to stand in the way of that by holding too tightly to something.
So in what context do you say that, in that, you're not, that's not for you, or you're not ready for that, or something along those lines? You alluded to that. Is that you having that view of yourself, or is that other people saying that those two things don't fit together? Because, and here's why I say that. there are, or we'll say there is a feeling that if you believe in God and if you're a Christian, you're not allowed to have money or work for those things. There's a big feeling that goes along with being a Christian. How that got there, I don't know. Because sometimes finances is the catalyst to make things happen. Like,
Yep.
so the simple response is A, it's not what you have, but what you do with it.
Yep.
And B, if you're worried that much about finances butting up against Christianity, you're already putting finances on a bigger pedestal than it needs to be.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, we're supposed to. The frustration within the Christian world is that it's clear all over Scripture that we're supposed to have joy,
Mm-hmm.
peace, and a term I call fullness. Now, that for me, that's the word that encapsulates that full and overflowing cup. That also means that my life, I'm content,
Mm-hmm.
not satisfied, but content with what God has given me.
Mm-hmm.
And yet we're supposed to prosper, which means more. I mean, essentially, the prosper means more. Take over the land. Go eat the great food that even somebody else grew.
Yeah.
Okay, that's all over. That's all over the Bible. So where we got that mindset, I'm not exactly sure, but it's not correct for me for sure. It's not actually correct. I want to be the person in my life like Ed Milet says, be that guy, that
Yeah.
first one in your family. I
Yep.
want to be that one in my family that says more is okay.
Yeah.
We're gonna do it like God said so, but more is not only okay; it's almost part of the prescription here.
Well,
Part of our
you can't get distracted by things that don't matter. Okay. But because if you look at godly principles, everything about God is in abundance.
yep,
Okay. Every single thing about God is in abundance. He wants the best for us. I mean, even look at, um, like the fish and the loaves when he 5,000, you know what I mean? Like, that's not the first time he did that for one thing, but like, it's not like, all right, you get just enough for what you need and you get just enough. And we have to be really careful and scared that we don't, it's like, no, it grew to where there was more than was needed. That's just a small example. But if you look at in the ways that God initially provides for us, there's nothing scarce about that,
you know,
so don't be surprised when he blesses you in abundance. And you said the word prosper, and I looked at the whiteboard behind me, because as soon as I put this whiteboard up, the first thing I wrote on there was Jeremiah 29:11. For I know the plans I have for you, plans to prosper and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future.
yep.
Like, when
That's
I started
what I was
my
just look. I was just looking up that passage because
okay.
it's not the mantra. Like there's a lot of pieces to that send me to a lot of other things in Scripture
Right.
and in my mind that I need to think about.
Right.
But that's God's heart. Now it was said to by Jeremiah, a prophet, to the children of Israel.
Yeah.
But why would he say that if it wasn't his heart? That's his heart for you. It's his heart for me.
Well, and I think you could argue that against, money is the root of all evil, but nobody said money is evil.
Yep.
Money is the root of all evil. The only and what is said is that the heart is evil.
Mm-hmm.
So money is the root of all evil. It's not evil itself, but the heart is evil. So if your heart is wrapped around money, you're going to use it for evil. It's the whole theme of, we almost land too long on the topic of money because people hold it at too high of a regard.
Yes, but 30, I don't remember these. I think there were 37 parables and 24 of them were about money.
Yeah.
Okay, so
it is
Jesus,
important.
it's important. Like it's important because it's one of the biggest stumbling blocks.
Yes.
And I'm not saying that I have it perfect, but I am saying that some of the extravagant things that perhaps are in my future, because I have a vision for them, they they may cause me to stumble. And I believe that God loves me enough to protect me from those things.
Yeah.
And yet he probably in that case will tweak it with something that has even more significant abundance for me. He will,
Yeah.
because that's what he wants. He wants me to prosper and have abundance. He wants fullness in my life. And if he knows that that vision won't bring fullness, that it'll make me stumble, as long as I hold loosely, that's the greatest position to be in.
Yep. Which is hard to do.
Well, it's part of, it's the biggest part of our job on earth is keep driving, keep going forward, keep prospering, keep, supplying for our families, providing, protecting, loving those around us, love God this way, and then love people this way. That's the great commandment, right?
Yeah.
Go do those things. But as we do that, if we don't do it in an understanding manner, we can get off kilter. And that's our biggest job in this world, is to stay. Balance is not really the right word, and yet it does create a picture of saying, I have to do both. I have to be and resigned and redeemed and sanctified and all the things that are part of the spiritual world. And I got to go out to work and put my boots on and go get dirty.
Right.
And I have to do that.
Right. I like that you said and, because that's something that I've been saying. I can't remember who exactly I heard say it, but they beat that. They landed on that as removing or and replacing with an and. Like, why do we have to have an or? And it just made so much sense, because we battle so much in our life on this or that. And it's a matter of sacrifice on one when you really want both. Well, instead of wrapping your mind around the framework of it has to be one or the other, why not just figure out how to make it an and statement?
Mm-hmm.
And it frees you up it changes your perspective on reality, what you're able to do. Like, you don't have to think that way. That's you putting that thought in your mind. Nobody else said that. Just look at it from a different way.
Yeah, I think that was John Maxwell.
Was it John Maxwell?
Yeah, I think so. He's probably not the only one that said it, though.
Yeah, because it's bugging me where I heard it from. But yes, it's. Oh, all right. So we can go two different directions here, and they're both going to be good ones. Because we've kind of segued into one or the other. What we had talked about earlier with the we'll just call it lead separation, like the distance between leading, distance that you may feel the higher up in ranks that you go in leadership, and personal development. What purpose is that actually supposed to serve? So we can go one of two directions here. Which one sticks out to you the most?
I didn't even hear it when you said the second, because I was thinking about the first. To be real,
There's our answer. Okay, let's go with it.
It's terrible to ignore the host of the podcast.
No, you're just but that's we can only no, you're
that's crazy.
Willing to admit what everybody does but doesn't want to say.
That's right. That's right. So where the reason I was distracted for a moment is because you said lead separation, as we become a leader and we move to a different zone. Yeah. I don't know what else to call it. Yeah. Position is one way to call it, but that's not it completely. A different zone in our life and in our companies, in our world. I go back to that book, Good to Great, where they basically analyze multiple companies and what does the CEO do?
Yeah.
What kind of person is he or she? How do they act? And in most cases, those people go out and spend time on the floor with their crew. They go meet them. They know, many of them knew their people by name. Mm-hmm. There's another book about, I can't remember the name of it right now, about Disney.
Okay.
and it talked about Disney World when it was built. It became a whole separate company, and the main guy there basically he went out and met his what they call team members or no, I can't remember what they call them in Disney staff, not staff. Anyway, he knew almost all of them by name, and that's the kind of thing that a great leader can do.
Yeah.
Once you transition out of many of the day-to-day details, and that's where I have the privilege, not on every day, because I'm back in a position. Somebody quit off of our management team out of the blue about 2 months ago, just moved from Oregon to Colorado literally over a weekend and said, I'm done. I'm out. And I was like, oh, well, that's surprising.
No,
so I'm back in
nothing.
Say that?
No warning, no nothing.
No. Apparently he knew on Tuesday, didn't tell us till Friday. 2 hours later, he was gone. By Monday, he started a new job in Colorado.
So I don't want to spend too much time on this, but do you think it's because he didn't know how to tell you? Because generally from what I've seen, even firsthand, everybody that works for you holds you in very high regard. And so do you think that there was any element of, I don't want to let him down, so the best way for me to do that is just to kind of rip the Band-Aid off at the last minute? Or
yeah, I don't think it was particularly intentional, but I think probably I would like to think that there was enough respect to say it's going to be a hard conversation.
Yeah.
I would like to think that our culture is good enough and that he fit it well enough that it was going to be, he saw the other end, the thing he had to go do, allegedly, supposedly, as important and needed to be done, but didn't want to leave us. There's, you get ripped, right? You get ripped inside. You become part of something for a year and you don't want to, I would like to think our culture was good enough that there was a place for him for sure. And then he didn't leave just because we were the problem.
Yeah, no, I don't think you would change.
And I would like to think that, but and then maybe that's why it waited to the last moment.
Yeah.
So either way, I haven't thought too much about it because it really is not productive. So that all being said is that he left. That was the position that I had before that we hired him for. Now I'm back in that role again. And the highlight of that is that now I get to rebuild that position better. I observe things from a distance. I watched him, and I'm not critical of him. He did a fine job. But now I think, okay, if I label what he did as a good thing, as doing a good job, what would it look like to be great? So since then, I went and did some training on that subject. It was a week long. It was intense. It gave me a headache. And now I've come back and now I know who to hire because there's certain things in that training that I'm like, I will never do these things effectively. It's not me. And yet now I know who to look for. Can this person then come in and do these things effectively and literally spark this part of our business to the point it needs to go? So I have a chance to rebuild it.
So it's not that clarify this for me. It's not that the process is ineffective. It's that you're ineffective in the process.
Yes, I am not.
You're not the best person to fill those shoes.
Yes, I'm not the right person in the right seat in this role.
Even though you own the business.
I'm founder. I'm owner. Yes. I have all this authority, let's say. But we did not multiply our business in the last, it's been 7 years, but we started seeing the light at the end of the tunnel on right people, right seat about 4 or 5 years ago. And we would not be where we are now if I forced my past, what my impressions of my past on Keith Jr. and on this business. If I didn't take my boots off and literally leave them at home and only visit the crew when I'm literally there to go just spend time with them and not tell them one thing.
Yeah.
If I had not done that, we wouldn't be what we are. We would not be, because I am not the right person for that. I'm also not the right person for, it was a sales director that quit. I'm not the right person for sales directing. There's
Yeah.
a lot of schedule to that, a lot of honing down and making sure that there's a ton of accountability to the guys in how they follow up, and how we're treating customers, especially prior to them being our customer.
Yeah.
And I'm okay temporarily with creating that accountability, which I've done, but long term, the next year, 2, 3, I'm not the right guy for that.
Right.
And I need to know that about myself. So I'm gonna build this so that the next guy can succeed, and not just be good, but really my goal is that he'll be great.
Yeah. Well, the reason I nailed that to the wall is because I find that happening with a lot of people and a lot of business owners, and they get to the point to where they start dreading. And I found myself in that same space, is you not dread your business, but you start to dread certain elements of it when it gets to a point. And I want to say, where I started hearing that theme is, so you're talking about good to great. There's a book about that, which I have not gone through it yet. But I started hearing those themes when I read Free to Focus, and I'm almost done with the E-Myth, the entrepreneur myth. And I started hearing those themes in there. And so it's interesting that you're talking about it now, is that just remove yourself from that position, and on one of the calls that we were in not too long ago with TCS, it was brought up. Were you in there when I had kind of mentioned towards the end of the call something about ego?
I think I bounced in for part of that.
Okay. So basically it was, in the business space and in the personal development space, everybody, it generally kind of revolves around some sort of business or some sort of goal pertaining to business. And everybody wants to grow. Everybody wants to do all these things. Okay. And what I pointed out is that your biggest hindrance in growth is going to be your ego getting in the way, because you have to step out of the way for your business to grow. Like, you cannot be the catalyst to take it to the next, from where it is now to where you want it to go. There has to be other people involved. Now, obviously there are many businesses that are very large with 2 people, so you have to take that with a grain of salt, depending on your industry. The asphalt industry, which is what you and I are in, it takes a lot of people. It takes a lot of processes. It takes a lot. And so you physically cannot, you can't physically do all those things. You can't mentally do all those things. And your desire might not be to do all of those things, and that's why I nailed that to the wall for a minute, is because I want to point out somebody with your level of success in your field, and it grows exponentially. I mean, there's more businesses involved that you've started, that you coach, other than K&L. And those themes helped propel those and just get them a giant jump start. And so you saying, somebody that's very successful in your space, that I'm not good at this position in my own company, that's something that kind of needs to be put on the wall somewhere. You know what I mean? I think more people need to understand that.
Yeah. Well, let me back up what I'm saying a little bit by saying, one of the things, I forget which book it was, of John Maxwell's, I've listened to a lot of them and read a few of them lately. Probably one of his, his 21 laws of something, right?
Yeah.
He's got a lot of those. And he was talking about the fact that when something fails within he was a pastor, when something failed within his church, when something fails within his business, it's his responsibility. I mean, he's 70 some years old now, so it's probably less now than it was. But it's his responsibility to jump in when something fails or someone quits or something blows up, to go in and basically go learn it, go become as good as it, go make it as good as you can get,
Right.
become the person that makes it good, and then pass it as soon as you can, because you're not going to be good at everything. You're just not.
Yeah.
And I appreciated hearing that from him, of course, because that's what I'm really trying to do. I want to make sure and light up that part of the business. It's sales. That's like fuel for this engine, man. We pull that's the horsepower
Yeah.
for this money
Nothing else
eating.
follows if you can't feed the beast.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And so I can provide that fuel by jumping in, rebuilding it, putting some timelines on it, say I can survive this, not just survive it, but I can prosper. I can build well for this period of time.
Yeah.
And then I'll have to pass this along, because I will not thrive if I'm here long term.
Yeah.
But it's my responsibility to make sure it's as good as it can be for the next guy or girl.
Yeah. So we may have taken that pretty far off course from where we started on. So I'm going to try to bring us back to where we left off so we can keep going on that. But it was lead separation, and you were falling in. You found that you had to kind of fill some spots, or you had that capability to do so, and that's where we had taken a left turn.
Well, in separating ourselves as a leader, we hear it a lot in our space. You got to take some time, and you really do. You need to take some time. It doesn't matter if you're driving in your truck and your boots are on. It's good to take those drives alone. If you have a job site that's 45 minutes away, don't turn the radio on. Unless you need to hear the weather report, don't turn the radio on. You have an app. You have an app for the weather anyway.
Yeah,
that's better than the radio.
Right.
So spend some time alone for a lot of reasons. Number one, the things that I mentioned in my life, and I think everybody's life needs, is joy and peace. Well, joy comes from thinking the right things and putting yourself in a position for joy.
Yeah.
Then joy is an outcome of how we, in many ways, how we behave, but it's partly mindset too. We can put ourselves in a position for that. Now, peace is often literally a mystery. It's a miracle. Like, where do we even get peace? You have a business that literally drives you, and it drives you crazy, right? At times.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so do I. But where do we find peace in all that? Where do we find peace in the fact I just got a call yesterday saying that one of my granddaughters has 2 ear infections and pneumonia? I'm like, where do I find peace in that? And so those are on different pieces of the spectrum.
Yeah.
But where do I find peace in that? And yet I was able to send a message to someone this morning that I listened to a podcast this morning called Focus on the Family. It's actually a radio program that comes on every morning at 7 here. It is most around the country, everywhere.
Yeah. And
I know this person in Virginia that's been struggling with a few things about her mindset, about her husband. It's a young gal, younger than most of my kids. And yet I know she's struggling. And I included her on a text message with my wife and sent her this podcast to say, this was really good stuff. You might consider listening to it.
Yeah.
And so in amongst all the other things that's going on, peace can be revealed by how I'm reacting to it. Like, what can I pass along? It might not be about my granddaughter having pneumonia, but it can be something else that's coming along. And I say, I got to overflow that to somebody. And so anyway, I took a little rabbit trail there, but the things we want is joy and peace.
Yeah.
And we need to think about those more often, I think, than anything else. What's going to create joy, peace, and fullness in our lives?
Yeah.
Again, some of it's mysterious and some of it's a miracle. Mm-hmm. Some of it we can't actually provide for ourselves, but that's where God comes in. That's where his wisdom and understanding this crazy world we're in comes in. But those are the things we need to think about often. The next 45 minutes your listeners have in the car, maybe they're in there now on this podcast. Don't shut it off yet, but
yeah.
When this podcast is over, spend the next 45 minutes thinking about what those words are like for you. For me, they're joy, peace, and fullness. How do I get those? What's my mechanism? And I'm not talking about tangible mechanisms sometimes, but where do I find that in my life?
Yeah.
And ask God his opinion on it, because he says he'll give it.
Some people call that meditating.
Yeah. Well, it is. It's dialogue, actually.
Yeah. Yeah.
I have a dialogue with the guy that knows the most about everything because he made it all.
Yeah.
And I have a dialogue. I'm back and forth.
I say that because I want to point out exactly what it is you're talking about. Like, you know, you hear the word, you hear that meditating word so often, and it's like, no, that's what Keith's talking about right now. Like, it's the same thing. Whether it doesn't
Yes.
matter what you call it, it's the action that you're doing.
Yes. And those for you and I in construction, and most of the people listening to this, no, we will not sit Indian style on our pillow and meditate. That is not the way it's done. I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
Sometimes it's just being quiet.
Yeah, me and yoga, we're not friends. No, no, not even acquaintances.
Yeah.
And you know what? That's okay. I
Yeah.
can get in my truck or I can take my run. I took a week and a half off now, and my body's starting to hurt. So I have to get back to running.
Yeah.
And that's my time. I'll listen to a podcast or I'll just run silent and just think, just get in my own thoughts. And because there's enough time, I can get through some of the garbage and get to the good stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I have to do that sometimes.
Yeah. That's
We
why
all do.
that's why I started exercising and going to the gym a lot. I mean, I've been doing it consistently. I say consistently, but in the middle of paving season, it turned out to, sometimes 2 times a week, sometimes 3 a week, but I've been pretty consistent 5, 6 days a week now. Now that we're in the off season, but I've found that, that's been my space to, we'll say, like, that's been my area for peace. To where like that, to where you unplug, there's nobody else around, and honestly it's hard to keep that because there's I mean, you've seen my posts and whatnot. I'll try to make it encouraging for somebody else,
Mm-hmm.
and what happens is other people will say, hey, can I go with you? Like, let me know when you go. Can I do this with you? And I honestly have to say, like, I really appreciate that, but this is something that I need to do for me. Like, this is my time for me to just get in my own head and be with my own thoughts for a minute. And so I've actually had to turn that down, but I get what you're saying. What I have realized is that well, I'm going to call it a safe space for me because it's like I find peace there. It kind of quiets the noise of the day.
Mm-hmm.
What I have to be careful of with that is that I don't find that as my only source
Yep.
for peace, because what I've caught myself doing is when just life is stressful or work is stressful, whatever it is, you want to go back to the place that isn't that, and so then you
Yep.
start to frequent that almost too much, and it's like, well, maybe I could go twice a day, and it's like, no, Kyle, like you still have to
Yep.
engage in your responsibilities. You can't pull out from that altogether, so realizing that there is a level of too much is also important too. And I found that in the time that I'm in that space for peace, like, you like you said, you kind of have to sort through a lot to get to the actual end game. And so, like, as I'm there at the gym working out, you start to think, well, maybe I could do this twice today, and then you start to bring yourself back down to reality. Well, no, like, appreciate it for what it is, but don't go overboard with it. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? There's still there's still you can't ignore the rest of your life because you don't have control over it.
Yeah. Yeah. It goes all the way back to what my mind thought when you were saying that is I've been working with somebody and they said, hey, what's your go-to prayer? I meet with this person every week and we talk about spiritual things mostly.
Mm-hmm.
He said, what's your go-to prayer? And I went, what is my go-to prayer? Do I have one? And I came to a conclusion about that.
Yeah.
But I did realize, and it's not the first time I've realized this, that the prayer I have most often prayed in my life is give me courage.
Mm.
Keep me in the moment. Keep me fit for what is coming next when I see that what's coming next is not going to be the thing I like to do or the thing I want to engage in. Maybe it's a hard conversation with an employee. Yesterday morning, I had one. It ends up that there's a disastrous marriage at home right now.
Yeah.
And but it was starting to show at work, you know, and I didn't start the conversation by saying, you've been late X number of times, all these things, and, you've not showed up. I said, what's going on? Because there's something going on.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen you at your best. I've also seen you at your worst. And this is not the best.
You're targeting the source rather than the symptom.
Yeah. Yeah.
The sickness rather than the symptom. The symptom is, there might be something that's struggling in their marriage. The sickness is, why is that happening?
Right. And once we figured out that, we ended up a few minutes later, he came to a conclusion that, the goal I set last year of doing these certain things, I only got 25% of the way through it.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm struggling, because there's a trust issue in my marriage. And had I gotten to the finish line on my goal, trust would at least be enhanced, maybe not fixed, but enhanced.
Yeah.
And so we went, okay, so I gotta recycle that goal and hit that again.
Yeah.
So, and it was all his conclusion. I just happened to know what his goal was because I was there when he said it, because I do goal setting with all my people.
Yeah.
And that is something that lights me up. But you can hear when I need to refer to something in their life, then I can go back to those goals and say, yeah, but what's going on with that? If you just get traction in this one area, would it affect the other? So speaking of the leadership thing you were just mentioning, as I transition, I really believe that the visionary role that I hold now really should be Keith Jr. But him, he's a very powerful personality and a sales guy. He's a salesman.
Yeah.
The problem with that is that he could, if we bring in somebody that is running the day-to-day operations of our business, and he is the visionary, he's going to come up with all these ideas, 10 of them a week, 9 of them might not be any good, but he might think 6 of them are really good, and he might go sell them.
Yeah.
And so we have to put the right person in place that has that, in not just intuition, but that enough to stand up against him. He's a powerful dude.
Yeah.
And so as I look at out in the future, him taking over the role I don't know where that puts me. Probably puts me on the bench somewhere. I in at least this business, and maybe I can get to some of these other great grand goals that I have or something at that point. But it does put him it literally helps grow the business, because he has a knack for it. He has a knack for seeing things 3 and 5 years out that the average person can't see, and even 3 and 5 minutes out. And he's got a knack for seeing all different distances at the same time.
Yeah.
And that being said, I need to understand this about him. I need to study him. I need to see him, know him, and I need to figure out in my life what it's going to take for me to get out of the way to light him up.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean I'm sitting on the bench. That means I'm on the bench rooting for him and probably starting another freaking team. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to start another team, right? In some other world, probably on some other baseball league,
Well, I mean, just the thought that comes to mind when you say that is that if you were to put yourself on the bench, or think, all right, well, where am I going to be at that point in time? Well, I'll probably be on the bench. That's insinuating that there's no further, that there's no more distance to go in that area, and I know that that's not true.
Yeah.
But sometimes it is hard to see that when you're in the moment. It's like, well, I don't know what it looks like over there, so I'm going to try to fill in whatever void of a picture that I can with where I'm at now. But that's just what the thought that popped into my mind, because I know that like there's no limit to growth, for one thing.
Yeah.
And I look like none of this would be here had you not had not set it in motion, for one thing, but also guided it to where it is now too, and I feel like we're going to have to do another episode.
Yeah. So let's go to a sports analogy to kind of put a cap on that thought.
Yeah.
should Kobe Bryant, should Michael Jordan have been on the bench in the fourth quarter? Well, no. But other guys that had a different set of talents could have, in some ways, demanded that they be on the court, doing their thing. They could have demanded that, but that would have been foolishness.
Yeah.
So at some point, they either had to have the forced maturity or they have to have their own maturity.
Right.
And then you talk about those great runs for the great athletes. Where did their coaches or managers often, where were they? Were they standing there literally coaching all the time, yelling? Actually, some of them were, but most of them weren't. They were there for rooting the team on. They were there for saying, oh, here's this little detail. Don't forget this little detail. You guys know the play. Here's the detail that you got to know.
And I'm just observing, okay? You got two coaches at that point in time, one that's yelling and one that's not.
Mm-hmm.
It would only make sense to me that if you have a coach that's yelling, it's because he didn't actually coach them the correct way when they're not in the middle of the game.
Perhaps it might be his personality. You consider me a calm person. I have not always been a calm person, right? But as I've become more of a coach rather than a player, I've started understanding that calm is what lights the players up. It gives them the ability to fail a little and do better.
Yeah.
But it's also my personality to really root them on, to really tell them the details. Make sure they know it. You got to know this detail.
Right.
You have to know it.
Right.
This could be winning or losing right here. This one detail. And that's what a good coach does.
Yeah.
Is I doing this. And if you do this, we got this, and that's what a coach is for. And that's more my role now. Now I'm far from done. I'm in good health and I could stay in the field, but that would not be good for Kano Industries.
Mm-hmm.
It wouldn't help us double again, which what we probably will do in the next 2 to 3 years. That would not be helpful.
And doubling for you from where you're at right now, that's a major feat.
Yes, we're currently at 37. We're currently at 37 employees, and we were talking about the number of trucks we need this next year to do the things that we're either doing already or starting to do. And just the number of trucks we need to handle the number of people that we have to put in those trucks to do their jobs. I think it's somewhere between 5 and 7 trucks, pickups and tool trucks and with trailers. And so we're probably talking 4 trailers, 6 more pieces of equipment, 14 people. It's crazy. Right?
Do you have a dollar amount? Do you so number of equipment, so X amount of trucks, it's going to cost us $1.5 million to get just the equipment, because from what I've seen, unless you're in the space that we're in, it doesn't really register to people that are asking. And so, there's a lot of different lists, and I'm kind of advocating for the listeners at this point in time, so, okay, well, if you need 6 more trucks, then just go get 6 more trucks. Well, it's not always that easy. There's also a dollar amount attached to that. And usually a truck comes along with other equipment and trailers, like you're saying, and then people, so just that small area of growth. Do you have a dollar amount that's attached to that you know of?
I don't. And here's the reason.
Yep.
Is that one thing that we're very selfish about is our profit margin.
Yep.
And then our gross profit margin is what we're very pointed at all the time. And that's a job costing, that's per project. We want to make sure we're as close to that as possible. Mm-hmm. We will sacrifice that if literally our jobs at times are big enough to produce the number of dollars that would, in multiples, like more number of dollars than we would normally produce in a 10-hour period.
Yep.
We're willing to sacrifice some of that profit margin to get the higher volumes.
Yep.
But we do it intentionally. So instead of giving a dollar amount that says X number of dollars buys this many people and trucks, mm-hmm. what we've been doing is for every 2 people, it requires adding 1 truck to our company.
Okay.
And then, so I, I won't get into it all now, but I just did something that's about forecasting. And it's basically an expanded org chart that
Yep.
tells us everything we need. And it talks about the people. It identifies the people we'll need in an ideal situation. In 7-8 months, we're supposed to have, based on this org chart I drew, 18 more people. Now, we're not going to do that because we're not going to buy 9 more trucks. And 9 more trucks would mean 6 more trailers and 7 or 8 more pieces of equipment. We're probably not going to do that. But it helps us pull this out and say, okay, for every 2 people we hire, we have to have a truck. It's this number of dollars. We got to look at our profit margins and make sure we can, out of our gross, can we spend that and still have some net at the end of the year?
Yeah.
Okay. So that's how we look at it. Is some of the things that are on that org chart I drew that have dates attached out to July 1st that we're going to hire these people and buy 1 more truck. What we're probably going to do is kick the can down the road into 2024, or maybe even middle of 2024 on some of those things that we want to bring in-house.
Mm-hmm.
A great example would be a saw cutting division. Saw cutting here is so hard to deal with. It's a scheduling issue. We need saw cutting on 20% of our projects, and
Really?
maybe of our commercial projects for sure, and probably actually about 20% of our residential projects too, because of transitions and stuff. And so we're looking at that going, yeah, but what if we had somebody, at least 1, maybe 2 people in-house that could do that for us? And so that's one of those that we may just suffer through the pain of having that sub, dealing with that sub for another year on those in those situations where we need that.
Yeah.
Until we get a high enough volume where we can actually produce dollars with that segment of our business.
Yeah.
Because right now it wouldn't be to capture more dollars, it would be to spend less and create and control the schedule. That's huge. If you control the schedule, you capture dollars.
Yes.
Right?
Yep.
So that's what we have to decide. And there was actually 4 new areas in our company. One we're starting for sure January 1. It probably won't ignite until sometime in March just because of the season.
Yeah.
But we're starting it January 1, and there's 2 pieces to it. We're starting those. But then there's 4 others in our company that if we did it the way it should be, if I just divided out the verticals, if we did this, we'd have to have this many people, we'd have them on this date. And we're going to look at that. And I know we're going to kick some of it down the road because the metrics don't work on, can we get that many people? Can we buy that? Literally, we can't buy that many trucks. They are not available.
Yeah, which is
they are not
problem as of the last couple of years.
Yes. And unless the recession grows, we're not going to get that many people either, good people.
Right.
We're not going to be able to find them. Now, the recession gets worse. That also takes our flow down a little bit, our cash flow down a little bit. Mm-hmm. The recession gets worse. We may have to drop our profit margins a little bit. Yeah. So that affects every one of those decisions.
Yeah.
So do I use a dollar amount? No, I don't. We use different metrics. For instance, last Tuesday, we made a decision on Keith Jr. brought a list of things, and he said, this is a thing on the list that I need you to help me make a decision on. A $75,000 trailer. I hate buying trailers. They don't produce anything for the business. Like, they don't make money.
They don't.
They don't. They're the worst. But you got to have trailers.
Yeah.
So we sat down, and based on our core values as a company, will it help the core? Is it core value neutral at least? If it's negative on the core values, we don't do it. Yep. If it's at least neutral on the core values, doesn't affect them at all, or it helps them, then we consider that. Then we consider our motto, the mantra that we use day to day, which is transforming lives 1 shovel at a time. Does it transform somebody's life in our company or our customer? Okay, if the answer to that is yes, it does transform somebody's life, then we move to the next one, which internally, the thing that we are always working under is quick and painless payment solutions. It's a little phrase we use amongst ourselves.
Okay.
Quick and payment solutions. If it makes us quicker, then that's, in this case, we buy that trailer. We don't have to unload so often. The answer is yes.
Yep.
But it does it make us more painless to the customer and to us?
Yep.
Does it make us more painless? The answers were all yes. So we didn't look at the amount of the trailer. We looked, did it? I mean, of course, can we afford it? That's a big question. That's why we do this in front of the finance person, which
Yep.
is my wife, right?
Yeah.
So we go through this list of things. Does it fit these three criteria? And is it at least neutral on our core values? If the answer to all those is yes, then the answer is 100% yes. Do we have the money?
Right.
And if she says yes, we have the money, then the decision's made. We made the decision in 3 minutes to spend $75,000 because we have not financial metrics that are making our decisions. We have company internal and external emotional metrics and culture metrics that make those decisions for us.
Yep.
I would recommend that for everybody. It's taken us 2 years, over 2 years to get there, right? So it's not something that happens all of a sudden, but last Tuesday we made that decision on the $75,000 trailer, and that's not the biggest decision we've made.
Yep.
But we made it in 3 minutes.
Yep.
And that's important. That's a good use of time.
I'm hearing that means a lot to me, because I know what it takes in order to, I know how many years and how many hours. I mean, you just kind of said it took you 2 years to get to that point, but it took you 2 years to make a 3-minute decision.
Yeah.
You know,
and then lots of experience too. So I've been in business 38 years, so it took more than 2 years.
Yes. So it took you 38 years to make a 3-minute decision. And the reason I say that is because somebody that's, you know, more closer to the space that I'm in, I sometimes feel like I have to read between the lines for the benefit of everybody, because just because you're making a decision in that time frame doesn't mean that somebody in my space is going to be able to do the same thing if I don't have the proper boundaries in play. The key to that is not the time that you made the decision, or that you solve three bullet points with it, is that you have the framework in place that guides you to make the correct decision.
Yes. And you can go back to a couple of things that I'll give. I'm sure we're getting short on time. So
we've got 4 minutes.
Yeah. So you look at the name on your shirt, it says integrity.
Yep.
Okay. If your decision doesn't fit that as your mantra, then the decision, if there's a no or a half no, then the answer is no for now. That is stop. Don't
Right.
We're done talking about it.
Right.
But if it's at least integrity neutral or above,
Yep.
then you move to the next step. And for you, I'm sure you've got core values that you work under as a business and everything. You can use those. There are things that you often use within your company that you use with the guys, like how to, for instance, another one we use often is how do we get 1% better? What if we got 1% better every week?
Yeah.
We could use that phrase right there to make decisions like this. Yep. Would this make us 1% better? If it's more than 1%, then the answer is yes. Let's push towards it. If the answer is, will it get us to 1%? No, it would only make us 0.5% better. Well, then we're not going to do it right now. We're not. And so whatever you guys use in your company, that in most cases you already have in place, at least in the upper management, the owner, the founder's mind, it's already mostly there.
Yeah.
You just have to pull it down to, and for me personally in my life, and this dovetails into the business, is joy, peace, and fullness. Does it actually create those things in me?
Yeah.
The trailer thing had something to do with that for me.
Yeah.
I'm sitting at the table and I am that guy. Does it create joy, peace, or fullness? If it doesn't create those, then does it take away from those? If it takes away from those, then my answer is no.
Right.
We're not buying a trailer.
Right.
But if it's at least neutral or moves those forward,
yep,
because it lights you up, because it brings you joy, or because it gives fullness to the company, fullness to if it encourages the management team within that division, that they now are more painless and more quick, then the answer is yes.
It doesn't serve us. Does it
If
serve
it
us?
doesn't, if it doesn't serve us based on whatever we use as our words to indicate that,
Yes.
then the answer is no.
Yeah.
Or if it does, then the answer is yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Keith, I don't want to take you any longer. I know you got a deadline, but I honestly I feel like we need to do this again probably next week so we can have a two-part um two separate episodes, because there's a lot of things that I circled here on my notes. The topic of prodigal father, as we talked about before.
Mhm.
I think that we can land on personal development, which we never really got into, and
Yeah.
your take on that. Um, and honestly, the lead separation, I feel like we've only got tip of the iceberg on that whole topic.
Yeah.
And so just between those three things, I feel like I would be doing everybody an injustice if we didn't open those up. So if you're good with that, then we'll do this again. Um, we'll continue this soon, and we'll probably do
Yeah.
a back-to-back episode with it.
Yeah. That'd be awesome. I'd love that.
So, one thing I before we go is I jot down a note here that's been sticking out to me when you were talking about good to great. What makes a great leader great? And you had brought up, well, they're still engaging with all elements of contribution. I don't want to say bottom floor, bottom rung. It doesn't. That's not what it's about. They're still engaging with all elements of involvement.
Mhm.
But one thing that stuck out to me, it's like, well, what do you have to do in order to be capable to do that? Because somebody in a growing business that's still setting the framework for how they operate, which is where I'm at right now. Okay, we are setting, how do we operate all the time, every day? What is the system that makes the thing do the work?
Mhm.
And in order for me to be able to engage with all elements of the business on a much bigger scale, there has to be a lot of work that's put in ahead of time in order to get to that point. A CEO that's stepping into the role of CEO in an existing company, as long as he manages his time and effectiveness right, he's able to do that. On somebody that's building up, you can't ignore your responsibilities and main priorities just to engage with everything else. Like, that will take you out at the knees too. And I just wanted to kind of put that out there. And so somebody doesn't take that and run with it in the wrong direction. Like, no, you still like, you don't get out of having to do the hard work in your business. So
No, 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 no. I was in the field most of the day yesterday,
yeah.
but I didn't wear boots. And we do another podcast. I can explain why. By the time I was done, I was freezing. I had layers on, and the day gradually got colder, but I was sitting there shivering because I'm having conversations with my guys, and they were pointed a certain direction.
Yeah.
And I'm going back out today after a meeting. I'm going to go back out and catch another couple of guys out in the field, and I'll explain why.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, Keith, thank you very much for your time. As you know, I enjoy talking to you. I mean, we've
I
talked.
appreciate it. Yeah.
Yeah. So
A
we
lot of late night
right on.
conversations sitting at the table,
A
right?
lot of
That
late night count. Your kitchen table will always hold a place in my heart. And
good.
I know that I'm not the only person that feels that way too. So again, thank you. And we'll do this again. So
Yeah.
uh actually we didn't even really get into very much on like how big your business is. I mean, what was it, 38 years you've been in business, but there's a lot that the listeners aren't going to know of your credentials, really, which are very impressive. So all I got to say about that is tune in for the next one to figure it out.
Yeah.
All
All
right.
right.
Thanks, Keith.
Yeah. Talk soon.
All right. Bye.